My apologies for recording a second video here when I went to start the first video again after pausing it. I accidentally hit the wrong button, so I'm sorry for that. Actually, it works out a little better for me in that it's a little easier to upload two smaller videos than one larger one. In any case, continuing on then with this lecture for week 4. With the background of persecution in mind, a second area of development in the second century is the emergence of apologetics, or coming again from the Greek word apologeia, which means defense, the attempt to give some kind of rational defense of the faith. Now, when I say rational defense of the faith, we often, of course, think about apologetics in our area, which takes a very, again, reasoned and almost abstracted form. That's not totally discontinuous with the nature of apologetics in the second century, but we do have to bear in mind that the context or the catalyst for the defenses of the faith that we read in this period is not strictly the attempt to articulate Christian belief in a rational framework. That's part of it. This is very much a Greco-Roman world, but there is a connection here to just the lived experience of the church in this time of periodic persecution. So, for instance, one of the most significant apologists of the second century is Justin Martyr. So called because of his martyrdom, his beheading, in fact, in 165 in the city of Rome. Justin was an important leader in the church, an important teacher in the church, someone who was highly educated and gave, again, a rational account of the faith in dialogue with especially Platonic philosophy, and was martyred with about around a half dozen other Christians in Rome in 165. And the account of his martyrdom is actually quite interesting in that it is a brief record of the trial details. And you'll see in that, if you ever have an opportunity to read just the account of Justin's martyrdom, that Justin is being tasked with giving an explanation of basic Christian belief. So again, this is to obviously a Roman authority. So this is not just an abstract teaching setting for Justin, and then subsequent to his confession, as well as that of some of the others who are with him, they are executed. Now, Justin, another interesting aspect, I should say, of Justin's martyrdom account there is that among the cohort that is executed, there are a variety of social positions represented. Justin, of course, is a highly educated individual, but there are others, including a slave who is executed with Justin. So this time of apologetics, like I say, has to be set within the broader context of what's happening in the church, and that does include periods of persecution. Other very significant voices to recognize and to interact with as you have opportunity during this period are Irenaeus. It's Irenaeus who will coin, or not, well, really coin or make what we would think of as the traditional use of the term heresy. So Irenaeus in this era is going to try to sort of characterize particular teachings in relationship to that which is handed down from in the tradition of the apostles, and identify continuity and discontinuity there. Another important figure here is Tertullian, as I've already mentioned, Tertullian of Carthage, who lived from 155 to 220, and is significant in his teaching and in development of such a teaching as the doctrine of the Trinity. Origen of Alexandria, 185 to 254. I won't say much about Origen at this point, because I'm going to try to get you a selection from a wild card selection from one of his works on first principles next week. But Clement of Alexandria, a series of figures trying again to interact productively, constructively with Greco-Roman thought and give a kind of reasoned explanation of the Christian faith. So that's another area of development to keep an eye on in your readings this week. A third area, as I've just mentioned, would be the development of what we think of as heresy. And it's during this era especially that the church finds itself interacting with Gnosticism. This is Irenaeus. Tertullian, again, is another figure that is directly interacting with Gnostic writings. It is during this era as well that we find the development of things like the Gospel of Truth, the Apocryphon of John, the Gospel of Philip, these again, very Gnostic Gospels or presentations of Jesus where he is, his humanity, the fleshliness is downplayed dramatically. He is a dispenser of secret wisdom, and his saving work is in bestowing a kind of, again, hidden knowledge or a hidden truth that allows those of us, thus material beings, to escape in some way our materiality, to allow the higher order spirit within to transcend to it and to draw nearer to its spiritual source of existence. Alongside Gnosticism, the church at this point is also wrestling with the ongoing issue of canon. And here, the most significant voice that you'll encounter this week is Marcion of Sinope. And let me pause one more time, and this time when I come back, I'll make sure I hit the right button. Okay, as I was saying, besides Gnosticism here in the 2nd century, one of the more significant teachers that the broader church will interact with and do so critically is Marcion. Marcion lived from 85 to 160, and Marcion, he was the son of a bishop, and so certainly inherited an understanding of the Christian faith, but found the God of the Old Testament, the God of the Tanakh, the scriptures of the Tanakh to be crude, as your reading from McCulloch will indicate. This God he found to be offensive, and he felt that it would not be possible for the true God, the lofty creator God, to create such a world as this material world in its brutality. The God of Jesus, of course, is a different sort of figure, a more loving, characteristically more loving God than Marcion found to be the case with the God of the Old Testament, and certainly seems to have expressed some concern about the nature of the God of the Old Testament and what it would mean to follow that God. And consequently, Marcion then really only recognized as authoritative collection of Paul's letters along with the Gospel of Luke. So this is Marcion's quote-unquote canon. And you can see where I'm going with this. This is another major area on which to focus in your reading and reflection here this week, the ongoing development of the canon. The church is not only collecting these books and identifying which ones are being read profitably by the early Christian communities, but it is now having to do so in direct interaction with a particular selection, if you like, which disregards in its entirety the Old Testament. And does so again on sort of theological grounds as well as practical grounds, concern again about the nature of the God of the Old Testament and what it would mean to follow that God. So inconsistencies between that God and the God apparently presented in Jesus of Nazareth. So this is quite an issue again for ongoing reflection, the extent to which the church, anyone in the church should feel a freedom to deselect books of the Bible that have been recognized to have authority by previous generations that have been passed along. Again, in the church's case, certainly as we get into the New Testament, the tradition of the apostles passed along in the centuries from the second onward. So I'm going to let you reflect a bit on that as you read about Marcion in McCulloch, and you're of course invited to do additional reading. As you're thinking about the canon, you'll have a wild card selection from the Shepherd of Hermas, which is a text that was recognized by some, as I indicate in that reading, to be scriptural, but never really attained to wide acceptance or a full acceptance within the church. And one of the more important documents that we have from the 2nd century with respect to the canon is the Muratorian Fragment, which is believed, the form that we have is believed to be a translation of something that may date from 170. And that's important again because we have there already here by the late 2nd century the church's attempt to identify books that are being read regularly by the early Christian communities over and against something like Marcion's canon. And the Shepherd of Hermas, incidentally, is not recognized by the Muratorian Fragment as one of those books. So have a look at that. And with that, then we're already into our 4th issue a ways here, and that is the way that the church now in the 2nd century is beginning to handle the emergence of different confessions, different traditions of teaching about Jesus. And so there are the 3 areas that McCulloch identifies: canon, creed, and Catholicity, or the attempt to identify a set collection of texts which are recognized to be authoritative to bear the teaching of the apostles. Creed, this I believe, credo, we believe, or statements. It's possible that the Apostles' Creed would date even from this time period. So in other words, this we believe, and therefore not that. And again, locate that within the context of the persecution of the church and the need to give this kind of confession, not just in an abstract way, but in a very concrete way in a time of periodic persecution. And then finally, Catholicity, or the emergence of church hierarchy, an ecclesial structure that is now going to adjudicate between true teaching and false teaching. Another area that I asked you to begin to think about in the reading from last week by the Didache. So quite a bit there then in those 4 areas for you to think about this week. And again, I encourage you to continue on a strong foot as we move ahead quite rapidly with the semester, and be in touch, as I've said, with any questions or concerns. Blessings to you as we get into week 4.